Welcome everybody to our Stock and Flock Talk. Today we have Dr. Matt Garcia. He's going to be talking to us about combining GPS and genomic technologies for a better estimate of bull power in rangeland beef systems. Dr. Garcia, thank you.
Thank you. So, like Dr. Root said, today I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that we're trying to get started here pretty soon, and basically just combining new types of technology. GPS and genomic testing aren't really new technologies, but combining them together in a production environment is a relatively new concept. And the reason we wanted to kind of do this was to get a better estimate of bull power, and I'll get into why we thought that was kind of important going forward. But to just kind of give a little bit of background. Now, bull power is just the number of bulls needed to effectively service every cow in the producer's herd. Essentially, the number of bulls that increases the probability that each cow is going to get bred during breeding season. Now, the problem with this is in assigning a specific bull power ratio is that bull power is going to be affected by a number of things like bull age, libido, terrain of the pasture, the size of the pasture, like we'll see in a little bit, nutritional status. Are those bulls, able to effectively maintain themselves long enough to make it through a breeding season? Reproductive competency in terms of, is that bull remaining fertile throughout the breeding season? Environment, we know heat stress, cold stress, things like that are going to affect the bull's libido. And then obviously the breeding program, what that producer is trying to achieve, the type of bulls he's selecting to go into that program. Now, the concept of bull power isn't anything that's new, but this has kind of been a fluctuating number when people actually made recommendations. And we've all heard the 1 to 20, 1 to 25, one bull per 20, 25 cows, is a good number. However, if you really kind of look at some of the directives that are out there right now, there's really no concrete number. And the reason for this is I think a lot of these organizations started to realize that bull power was going to be different in pretty much every environment. Now, we have some preliminary data kind of going back a few years and looking at, how many cows one bull was actually breeding or servicing. And in my previous position, we actually looked at this a little bit. And this is one of the things that, needs to be taken into account when we're talking about bull power. The size of the breeding pasture is something that's going to greatly influence, bull power. How far that bull has to travel to service cows, how far he's actually going to, chase these cows down. And in our preliminary pilot data, we saw that we had one bull that sired 48 calves in one season. We saw one bull that sired no calves, and we saw one bull that sired 12 calves. Now, the interesting thing about this is, when we started breaking this down a little bit further and looking at which bulls were doing the work, the one bull that sired 48 calves was the youngest bull in that pasture. What he was doing, because we had video cameras set up, was every time an older bull would go to mount a cow, he would go and, basically knock that bull off while he was mounting and then go and service the cow himself. We had in another pasture, we had one bull that sired no calves, and that also was the youngest bull. He had just, for dominance reasons, wasn't allowed to breed. And then we had a bull that sired 12 calves. And, in that instance, it was a multiple bull pasture again. But, once again, there are other factors that contribute to him only siring 12 calves. Now, once again, size of pasture. Though that study was done on pastures that were 40 acres in size. That's really not relative to a lot of Intermountain West breeding pastures. Now, 40 acres versus 4,000 acres or 1,000 acres for a breeding pasture is a lot different. Now, even if you look at the Beef Improvement Association, BIF, they no longer publish concrete bull power estimates. They give an estimate of, or they give some talk to, how many bulls, need to be in there, but they don't give an actual number. They talk about bull power in terms of service capability. And the reality is 1 to 25 may not be acceptable in some situations. If you got, a lot of terrain to cover, nutritional status is an issue, bull injury is an issue. 1 to 25 might not be acceptable to get that whole herd bred. But in other instances, 1 to 25 may be overkill. meaning that, one bull is going to service more than 25 cows. And if you have more of the bulls you need in there, you're basically paying to maintain bulls throughout the season. So basically what we wanted to try to do for our project was we wanted to introduce producers to these technologies and how to integrate them into their system in order to really improve some of the production practices. And the two technologies that we chose were genomic technologies, more specifically pairness testing, and GPS technologies. And I'll show you what we're using for our technologies later on in the presentation. And also part of our study here was to recruit Utah beef producers in various environments and production systems to be part of this study. We wanted to, basically evaluate northern producers, southern producers, western producers, eastern producers, to really get a better estimate of bull power in various environments. The only issue we've had so far is our limited GPS resources. These GPS tags that we're using are pretty pricey, and they do take a while to get produced. So basically the objective of our bull test study was to utilize GPS technology and genomic testing in various environments to kind of get a better estimate of bull power, going forward. Now, what we're using these GPS ear tags, and, there's a picture of it, down here. They do link with satellite signals. They do have a UHF link, basically a radio frequency that we can utilize as well. These are the actual bull tags that we're using, the GPS tags. They are about twice as thick as a normal ear tag, but they're actually not very heavy. So I don't think there'll be much of an issue there. What we're proposing to do is put these ear tags on these bulls prior to breeding season. At that time, we'll also collect an ear notch or hair sample from those bulls so that we have their DNA on file, so that we can later correlate calves to specific sires. The good thing about these ear tags is that they are solar powered. So we have a pretty good source of constant power there. They are capable of collecting over 500,000 data points, depending on how long you leave them out there. If that battery is getting charged significantly, so that's a good thing. After the breeding season, we'll take these tags out, and we can actually download this movement data at that time. We can also kind of follow this in real time through our radio frequencies. We have a transmitter that we have as well that we can actually track these ear tags, which makes it kind of nice also because if these ear tags come out, we can actually go out and locate these tags in the pasture. Now, the next step of this will be pairness testing, the genomic technology part of this study. And what we're going to do here is, being that we already have the DNA on the bulls, that subsequent calving season, we're going to collect ear notches or hair from all the offspring that are born that next year. We'll extract DNA on those individuals, and then we'll conduct pairness testing to determine which bulls sired which calves and how many calves each bull sired as well. Now, we know there are some challenges here. Some of the challenges that we know we're gonna kind of face is, obviously there's a huge variable of terrain, not only terrain but breeding pasture size, breeding season. We don't have a uniform breeding season here in Utah. Bull age is going to be another one. Some producers don't mind using 12-month or 18-month-old bulls. Some producers are using some older bulls. Bull condition is another issue. How well those bulls are maintained in the off season is obviously going to affect their performance during breeding season. And then obviously we have a variable breed. Everything in the beef industry isn't uniform. There really is nothing uniform. So, that non-uniformity is one of the variabilities that we expect to encounter with this type of study. Now, in terms of anticipated outcome, after we've kind of conducted the study and we get some data rolling in, we think this is going to be, somewhat beneficial in terms of being able to correlate bull movement with the number of sire, or basically bull behavior with the number of calves sired. Is it that bull that, is constantly traveling with the herd? Is he moving with the cows at night, during the day? Is he bedding down with them? Is he constantly with them, moving, traveling, trying to, breed cows? Is it that bull with limited movement? Is it that bull that's, laying down by the water tank while everyone else is out traveling and grazing, and he's just waiting for the cows to come in to get a drink, and he's servicing cows, when they're coming in? Is it our young, vigorous bulls? Those young bulls that are really getting after it, traveling, moving a lot, or is it our old dominant bulls? Our bulls that are a little bit older, bigger, that are doing the breeding and keeping those young sires kind of exiled out while they do their work. Now, the other thing we kind of would like to do with this is we kind of expand the study going forward. We think this is going to give us a better estimation of bull power and range systems. Obviously, we have a very unique beef production system here in the Intermountain West, and we kind of look at it as another tool to kind of help us become a little bit more efficient. It will also potentially give us a tool to better manage those bulls during the breeding season. If we're seeing that, some of our older bulls are, siring that glut of calves right at the beginning of the season, but then they're not really siring a lot of those calves at the end of the season, we might be able to actually manage our herd a little bit better, our bull power a little bit better, so that we're having, maybe some younger, fresher bulls going in there the second half of the season, and increasing our conception rates. So it might give us a better idea how to manage our younger bulls, our older bulls during that season, rather than just kind of throwing everyone out and hoping for the best. Another thing that we're kind of looking at here in terms of the bull movement and behavior and pairness testing is this might actually give us another selection tool. It might actually give us a tool to, another trait or another variable that we can really evaluate to better identify proven breeders in a range system, or which types of bulls are going to be the bulls that are really going to drive higher conception rates in our herds going forward. And I know we went through that kind of quick, but that's kind of what we're doing with this. We have ear tags. We've been recruiting producers going forward. We actually only have 2 ear tags right now, but we're expecting to get the rest of them in relatively quickly, and we'll be kind of going forward with this as soon as we get all our resources here and we have some people lined up to help us out. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all might have.